Hello. Today I'm going to show you how I made the little Tiffany envelope purse that I sent with my pocket letter that held the embellishments. This is actually a snap closed purse, which I was super excited about. I had looked and looked for tutorials on different closures, and I really wanted something that wouldn't be shown from the outside, but I couldn't find anything. So I had some snaps, and I figured out a way to incorporate them, and they work great. So really excited about that. So this was inspired from the Tiffany Co website, where they have their little charms with the gems on the back with the postage stamp. I just thought they were so cute. And this was the original purse, but I hope that you find the changes that I've made in my new template to be even better and a little bit more polished. This is a pretty easy project. It's going to really help to have the bird's eye view of this, and I've included some templates for download. If you have a Cameo, I've included SVG files, and if you don't have a Cameo, they're easy cutouts to do without a Cameo. So there's a PDF document for download there too. The cardstock that I used was from Stampin' Up, and I loved how it has silver on one side and the white cardstock on the other. Because this is, it does scratch, I did use it face to face throughout the die cutting process. I used a die cut to create the scallops, and I put them face to face, cut them together so that they would line up perfectly when they were back to back on the finished product. So the challenge I ran into here was how to make these scallops come to a perfect point. They were either double scallops on the end or just not even. So what I wound up doing was leaving space to create my own scallop at the top. I die cut the sides, and then the size of the scallops is actually the same size as a regular hole punch. And so when I was done die cutting, I simply punched out a little circle and placed it at the top, traced it, and then cut it exactly where I wanted. And that's how I was able to make a perfect point at the end of the scallops. I loved creating just a little bit of extra dimension in the scallops, and I used the Heartfelt Creations flower shaping toolkit. And I'll put a link below to that, but I basically just added a little bit of dimension inside the center of each scallop, and it really kind of created a really nice, almost metal look. It was really pretty. The next part of the process was just to make the little stitch lines before I started gluing things to this base. And I used a die for that as well, listed below. But basically I just wanted the center point and end point to be the same on both sides. That's why I measured. After I embossed that, I glued the scallops to the inside. And then I just set it under some weight to let it dry so that it would dry flat, and I had a nice sturdy base to work with. Next was my favorite part, and that was putting the snaps together. Using the inside backing that matches the front scallops, I basically just found a nice center point close to the point to where I could put the snap edge in. I used an 1/8 of an inch hole punch to create a space to insert the snap. And basically I just used sew-on snaps, and this part requires the little male end. And I just basically fed that through so that the point was out toward the silver part. So feeding in through the back. And then I was just able to glue that to the main body, and that seals that snap in, and it won't go anywhere because it's sticking out. So I grabbed an entire snap assembly for the bottom part. We will remove part of it in a little bit, but I put the male end through from the front and the female end in through the back. We will remove that male end in a little bit, but then I was able to put the backing on and just glued on the little flaps, and made sure that they folded out in the Z fold so that it flips open To create the little folders that each die cut fit into, I basically just cut 3 at a time using the same scallop die that I had used before, and then I just folded them and glued them in. And the template comes with tabs. I didn't use the tabs because I didn't want to create any extra space for things to fall down into. I just wanted a really tight fit because it's really hard to get in there. So I did not use the tabs, and it's really easy not to use them, just cut it straight instead. But I put them under weight to dry before I glued them on, just because I didn't use much glue on the sides. I used just a very, very thin little strip because I wanted as much space available for it to actually hold the die cuts. So once those have dried, basically you just glue them in to the spaces on the flaps. Now, the trick here is the scoring and the folding. The score lines were placed both just above and just below the flaps, on the inside and the outside. So these were very, very light score lines. We're not trying to really press down hard. We're just making a slight score to kind of help it bend. And I did a second score line on the top of the flap, about 1/8 of an inch above the first one. Again, very light, just enough to help it bend. Probably the most important thing about the scoring and the folding is that you want to do this while the project is still fairly wet. That glue is still pliable. If you wait until it's dry, it will crack when you try to fold it. Okay, so to start folding these now, you just very, very slowly start working it. And it's very pliable. It's really unique paper that way. But I'm not trying to force any bends. The score lines will help. I'm not using the score lines right here at all. I'm just basically, they're there just to help just a little bit, but I'm just kind of molding it as I go. As you figure out exactly where the bottom snap and top snap need to meet, you can cut that bottom edge accordingly. I cut about 1/8 of an inch off right there. But then I removed that male end because we already have a male end in that top flap. We don't need it to hold it anymore. Once the extra piece has been removed, that top snap will fit into the bottom snap, and you can just close it and let it dry. So the postage rectangle layer set is what I used to create the postage stamp. However, the smallest of the dies is way too big for our project, so I had to modify it. So to achieve the size that I needed, I basically made 2 cuts. The first cut was my largest cut, and it was basically the end size that I wanted it to be, minus 1 little postage notch. So I cut it that one way, and then I picked up the pieces, lined them up, and then made 1 more cut. This left me with 4 pieces, and I basically just started gluing them together kind of like a puzzle, just making sure to always match up the little postage ends perfectly as I started layering those 4 layers. Even though the center part, you could see the seams, you didn't see the different layers through the postage edges. The edges were all perfectly lined up, as with layering a die cut. So to hide the top and kind of clean that up, I basically cut a 3/4 by 3/4 inch square out of the silver and just layered that on top. And once that was layered on top, basically it just looked like a beautiful little postage stamp. So to prepare the little postage stamp for the sequin and the crystal that we're going to inlay into it, I basically cut out another square, and then using the Hero Art Circle Infinity dies, I used a small circle, centered that, die cut it out, and I ran that circle through the die cutting machine again, with no die. I just ran it through so that that foil could pick up some of the little scratch marks from the die cutting plates. It added a really cool texture to it. And so I thought that would just make a really neat texture for the sequin and the crystal to sit on. And I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but the purse will actually fit perfectly into a pocket if one wanted to actually put that as a pocket in a pocket letter. I did mine on the side, but it definitely could be incorporated into a design. So there you have it. And that is the envelope purse. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask, and I'll help you however I can. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you again soon.